Today I'm going to talk about whether clairvoyance runs in families. For example, do we inherit psychic and mediumistic abilities? So are psychic gifts inherited? Right back to the 16th century, they've believed that the seventh son of the seventh son will inherit a sort of psychic power. And that even the seventh daughter of the seventh daughter, they used to say, would have the special psychic powers. In fact, it wasn't strictly psychic powers, it was more shamanistic powers, more the power of healing. They'd be healers or doctors. And if they had this special birth lineage, then they would have special abilities. And of course, a lot of people have played on this in recent years. In fact, there was also supposed to be an extra one to this. They should also have 7 markings, 7 stars shown on their body somewhere as a birthmark. Which I think is actually quite interesting, because the 7 sisters in the sky, the Pleiades, is an interesting concept that is through a lot of mysticism, and that there were special perhaps connections with people from outer space, some say, that came from the Pleiades, you know, the snake people. So this is an interesting thought there as a sideline. Maybe there were special people that had special connections with the Pleiades. Perhaps that's what the 7 stars were all about, which was the original superstition. But certainly it's there. So if that was the case, then psychic powers are inherited. Okay, so that's one particular thought. Now also the Romanese also claim to have inherited psychic powers too, don't they? People used to call them the Gypsies because they believed they came from Egypt, Egypt, right? They actually came from India. So those travelling people would have carried with them a lot of the mystical ideas from India. You know, a lot of things were attributed to the Gypsies, who to the villagers and things of Europe, who saw these mysterious people coming. And often we attribute things to people what we don't know, don't we? Negative and positive things we project onto them because they're strangers in our environment. And they used to think that they had things like levitation abilities, astral travel abilities, dream interpretation abilities, and that they could give curses and blessings. Right, because they were mysterious to them. So I think the early Romanese used to play on this, didn't they? Didn't they play on this idea when you're coming into town that you can tell your fortune, you better give me the money or there's going to be a curse on you, you know? So they played on the superstition. So perhaps this concept of Romanese having any special gift was part of a way of them making a living and doing tarot cards and things. Which they adopted, not necessarily from the Gypsy tradition, but the tarot cards and palmistry in particular, which was very much endemic in India. Remember palmistry. Those things would immediately assume that because they do those things that they've got psychic gifts. But as we know, a tarot reader and a palmist are not necessarily psychic. These are interpretation skills. We read the palm. We don't use our clairvoyance to tell about the palm. We read the tarot cards. It needs no clairvoyance whatsoever. So you don't have to be psychic to read the cards or the palms and so forth. So maybe there's something endemic there. You know, they were the Romanese. They came from the word Rom originally, which was a deviation of the word Dom. Now that was a class in India, a subclass in India actually, of quite low status. They were the cleaners, the sweepers, they were the musicians, which were considered as a lowly occupation. Jugglers were also considered a lowly occupation, but they also did things like metalworking and basket making and so forth. So they were travelling tradesmen in many ways. But of course we surround them with this whole idea of mystery because they came from India. They had a different culture. I think there's even traces of Sanskrit in the original language of the Romany language. I'm not sure about that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, you know, my question there is, you know, is that really an inherited gift, or is that a group of people taking with them skills that they learn in India and then using them to make a living, but not necessarily having psychic skills. They would have obviously the traditions that they'd learn palmistry, so they'd learn it from a young age perhaps, so that gave them the edge, but not necessarily a psychic gift, if you see what I mean. So, but then, you know, we only have to look at our own families as well to also think about, is there a psychic lineage, you know? Now, maybe you have. Maybe put some comments about this. Have you got people in your family that you know are psychic and there's a line of psychics? Or can you think of any psychics who were famous as the seventh son of the seventh son, for example, truly known for that, you know? And so forth. And have you got examples of somebody in your lineage that seems to suggest that psychic powers run in the family? Now, in Jane's family, for example, my wife, she was taught a lot by her grandmother, who had quite a lot of psychic ability, you know, so it would suggest that it was in the family genetics. Similarly, in my family, there seems to be a certain amount of that as well. My grandmother O'Leary, she was allegedly very psychic. She came from Ireland. She was from Cork. And she always professed psychic abilities. I didn't know her because that's my grandmother's mother. But she was known for that. And similarly, my aunts, one aunt in particular was very interested in psychic things, and my grandmother used to get prophetic dreams and things. So it's there, and in our children, they seem to have sort of one of my daughters is very telepathic. We all seem to always connect at the same time on the telephone, even though we don't always talk as much as sometimes we want to. But you know, when it does, we connect and we know. And that also kind of runs in families, doesn't it? So maybe your family's had something like that. But I don't think that, you know, even with all that, would I say that I've inherited this gift through the family? Because if I look at all the family, you know, there's whole numbers of the family that are far from psychic and would be quite opposite to it and anti it even up to a point, you know? So it doesn't necessarily mean I don't think if I was to look at my genetic line that I'd say necessarily that it's run in my family, but maybe you've got different ideas. I think we make a lot of mistakes with this whole idea of indigo children, you know. Now this was a whole idea that sort of hit the media and hit the internet about there are certain children that they called indigo children who are supposed to be the next leap in evolution. And I certainly think that consciousness, psychic gifts and spiritual gifts are kind of an evolutionary leap. But is that determined by our genetics, or is that determined by our spirit? And I'm going to talk about that again in a moment. So, or is it both? You know, but certainly with indigo children, there's an awful lot of stuff there that I looked at it and I felt a bit suspicious about it. Some of it, if I'm honest, because you know maybe. Some of those children have learning abilities and the parents are in denial of that, or they need psychiatric treatment of some sort and the parents are in denial again, and it's a way of avoidance by telling yourself that the child is special, he's got some special gift, rather than accept that the child might need some psychiatric help. You know, so again, question marks. Now, am I being a bit hard? You know, put your comments below. Maybe I'm being a bit hard there. The obvious thing is if we could get some DNA research on this, and because in the DNA sequence of the human being, there's all this what they call the dark DNA, the junk DNA that we don't know about yet, and we're kind of beginning to dig it up. There's an ENCODE project, I think it's called, in which they're trying to look at the DNA and understand that actually in all this hidden stuff, it is valid. We're only kind of conscious of the top part of it, the fraction of it, a bit like we were with the brain so long ago. But now we're beginning to discover actually none of this is junk. There might be something there, and it could be that we could find something in there that would indicate that psychic abilities. But of course, you know, science is in denial about any idea that psychic abilities could possibly exist, because it overturns so many basic ideas in science if they were to accept that the spirit was real. So I think it's going to be some time before we get science on board with this. Okay, so what do you think? Put some of your comments below. Now I'm going to talk in a moment a little bit more about what I really think about this. What is behind this? What do I think is the final answer to this question of are these gifts inherited? If you're enjoying these mystic talks, you will enjoy my books, available now in paperback, on Kindle or on Audible. Now, there was a great medium that I used to admire, and many other mediums of my generation admired him. It was a man called Gordon Higginson. He was a physical medium and used to produce ectoplasm. And one of the things that he said was, mediums are born, they are not made. So that would mean that we're born with the gift. We're born with the gift, and even if no matter how much we struggle, we can't develop if there's not a gift there in the first place. Now that gift is latent in most of us. We don't know we've got it at first. I mean, sometimes as children we get signs of it. I mean, I certainly did, and Jane did. I used to be able to see auras around people when I was a child, and that scared me a bit. And I also used to see my granddad, who died, stood in my room with my dog that had died. So and I used to scare my mother silly with it because I was so convinced. I was, and in fact, the proof of it for me was that I saw my granddad in the room, stood, and I said to my mother, and she was shocked because I had not been told. I think I was about 6 years old, but I had not been told that Granddad had died, and I had no idea. I didn't even know he was ill as a child or in hospital. They keep it from you at 6, so it shook her. So we get proofs, perhaps, when we're young, and so it's there perhaps from an early age. So perhaps Gordon Higginson was right. Perhaps we're born with it. But at the same time, we have to develop it, because, I mean, my mediumship would not be any good today, I don't think, if I hadn't sat and been taught and trained in what we call a circle. You know, like I do on some of my lessons online here. We sit and we develop in circle, and that's how we learn to trust the gift and let it open. So perhaps we have latent gifts, but that still doesn't answer the question if they're inherited, because I think it's a dodgy thing if it was inherited. You know, it's a dangerous thing, because it would mean they're not spiritual gifts at all. They would be genetic gifts, wouldn't they? They'd be coming from the genome. They'd be coming from our body. We wouldn't necessarily be linked with spirituality any way whatsoever. I mean, this could account why so many people that I see working as mediums and psychics seem to have such poor values. You know, they like to drink and smoke and live pretty rough lives a lot of the time, and well, I won't go into it, but you know, there's a number that I just feel uncomfortable with, and you see that, and sometimes liars, but they might not be even mediums at all. They might just be fakes, you know, so who knows. But you know, it worries me. Could it be the fact that if it was a physical gift, then it makes no difference whether we have spirituality or not? I mean, there's been cases of physical mediums who have all the gifts of physical mediumship, and yet as people were some kind of a bit debatable, particularly in the past, you know. So perhaps it's not a spiritual gift whatsoever. Perhaps it does come from the body. Perhaps it is inherited, and if that's the case, you know, it makes you question, doesn't it? You know, perhaps that's why, like I say, some people have bad values. But if you look at all the spiritual literature, particularly the literature of India, which, as you know, I'm very interested in, they talk about that cities, that's what they call psychic gifts, because, you know, what we call psychic gifts in the West are kind of minuscule to the psychic gifts they talk about in India. You know, like I said about the Romanis talked about levitation and things. I mean, things like levitation, things like omnipresence, being everywhere at the same time, being multiple places at the same time, being able to become very, very tiny, being able to make yourself invisible. I mean, these are all the gifts that are listed as part of the Siddhi powers, the whole great list of them. And the psychic skills that we have of communication with the spirit world, or communication in a telepathic way, or being able to see a person's future, are considered as quite small. I mean, I only need to look at those incredible things that were told me out of the Nadi, you know, in astonishing psychic powers they must have had. So, but they say that those gifts develop as one takes the spiritual path. In fact, one mustn't over-focus on them at all, otherwise they can become a distraction and take us away from the journey to enlightenment. So that's another issue, but we could talk about later. But I tend to believe, I think that is the case, that we do develop psychic powers through our spiritual work, you know, through what we call, what with things like our yoga, like our abilities to our self-discipline, our powers of concentration and focus and so forth. And although I dismiss many of the people that claim to be psychic as having any gifts like that, because I think most of the people that claim to be psychic nowadays, quite frankly, aren't. Sorry, but they're not. And that's not going to get me disliked a bit, but I think many aren't. They just claim to be. Suddenly it's super popular. I mean, when Jane and I first started as mediums, I mean, I could have told you pretty much all the mediums in the country, I reckon. Probably not, but I mean, certainly locally, I mean, there was a handful, you know, and there weren't many. And Gordon Higginson, again, who I said at the beginning, used to say one in 1,000 is psychic. And then he said, but 1 in 1,000,000 is a medium. Right, and that I think is a pretty good guide. And if you look at the number of people claiming to be psychics and medium, it's more than 1 in 1,000. So, you know, makes me wonder. And definitely with mediumship, 1 in 1,000,000. There's very few people that have that gift. Sorry, that does sound kind of arrogant because it assumes that I've got the gift. But no, I do worry about that. So, so where do these gifts come from then? You know, who has it and why? I think it comes through spiritual work, but not just in this lifetime, because I don't think I could have possibly done enough spiritual work to develop my psychic gifts in this lifetime. I think it's come from previous lives and previous lives and previous lives. An Indian man said to me, Craig, your gifts, they come not from this life, they come from many lives, many lives. And you wouldn't have them if it hadn't been many lives, so sometimes of self-denial and tapas, and sometimes of yoga and spiritual work and suffering that you go through to get the gift. And the gift comes, you know, as a secondary thing, because it must be ultimately our spirituality that's important. And, you know, who can claim to be spiritual? We can't claim to be spiritual, but the gifts are there somehow, you know. So maybe it does come from spiritual lives, or maybe it's just a plain fluke that comes from nowhere, you know. We certainly, you know, when you're a child, you feel different. You know that you're different from other people. And Jane and I, we both seem to have it from birth. And I know many of the good mediums and psychics that I know out there are really genuine. They've often had it from birth. It's been there, whether they want it or not. You know, I didn't want to be a medium. There was I resisted it. That's another talk. But no, so it's difficult to answer, isn't it? It's difficult to answer ultimately, but those are some of the questions that we have to ask about if mediumship is inherited. My feeling is, my conclusion would be that spiritual gifts come through past lives. Not all spiritualists accept past lives. I do, but past lives and work in the past has given us that gift, and we might not initially be conscious of them. Certain point in our life they can flourish, because that is the same point in our life, like say you get to 35, it was 35 in a previous life that you had the gift, you know, so it flourishes through our life depending upon our previous life and lives before. So what do you think? Am I right, you know, or am I balmy here, or am I just being a bit arrogant with this? You know, put your comments below in the bottom there. Now I'm going to put another clip up in a minute. I put clips at the end of some of the work we've done on TV and things in the past, and sometimes bits and pieces from this channel that I think you might find interesting. So there's going to be a clip coming up in a minute, but please also do subscribe to this channel and click the little bell thing at the bottom to make sure that you get updates all the time. And if you like this channel, do also become a patron. Consider being a patron of this channel, because you can help us to keep it going, but more so to help us to take it to the next level. So that we can do teaching not only from my library here and my room here, but also from a spiritual centre that we hope to have in due course. And of course the spiritual work we try to do generally, and the charitable work we do as well. Okay, coming up, another clip from the past.
The first meeting of the development circle is about to begin. The trainee mediums will try and develop their intuition with psychometry.
We've got a few things. We've got a mobile phone.
Holding an object, they'll try and pick up on the characteristics and memories of its owner.
If they can just get a little bit right, give themselves, particularly at this beginning stage, it's something that's going to give them a boost to their confidence, I'd feel really pleased.
To you first, Phil. First impressions.
there's somebody related to this person that they got some kind of problem with the lungs. That's all I'm going to give.
Okay.
This person might have a weakness in the back.
Humour is an integral part of what makes them tick.
I'm hoping they can dig a little bit deeper with their intuition and pick up on those things that you couldn't possibly know by guesswork.
Okay, I get a rainbow with this person. I get a blockage as well. Something to do about the ear. And also a connection to gravy. I don't know if they like cooking, but there's something about gravy.
Whose is it first?
I knew it was
Yes, nobody says positive things.
That was
Tell
excellent.
Well, let's have the detail. What's what?
About the weakness in a part of your
I've got a
back.
bad back.
We're right with that.
Love humour.
Humour.
Yeah.
Also said about
Gravy.
yeah.
Gravy, I can't place the gravy.
We're going to move on and do another one. Throw it whatever comes to you. First impressions are important too.
Oh boy, I felt a bit of sickness then. I don't know if that was from me or from this person. So there's been a bit of a mountain to climb. That's why I see is like a peak of a mountain and somebody going up it. So there's been some kind of struggle.
Ask your intuition.
Well,
Give me something
I
unusual.
just saw a sheep then. Not
Okay, yeah, that'll do.
not a real sheep.
Yeah.
It's just a cuddly toy sheep.
Okay, and one more thing. Don't censor it. Don't change it. Let it come.
A hula hoop.
Whose is this?
It's my phone.
It's your phone.
Yeah.
Hula hoops, I don't think, perhaps. See you right with a hula hoop. But let's have some details.
I
there,
thought it was a
Skylar.
secret, but has been a struggle, and it's still ongoing. Sheep.
Now, let's get a little bit more depth now.
The first thing I felt, and I feel it again now holding the watch, as if I've got stiff. My arms feel really stiff for some reason. I don't know if I'm using them a lot. They feel stiff. Heartache, I got lost and I want to cry.
Can you identify any details about that, a time in their life that might have happened?
I can't.
Ask your unconscious, it'll give it to you.
I could just see the eyes. Real sad eyes.
Okay, that'll do. You've obviously got very deep. We'll leave it now. We're going to look into that. Ooh, that got you quite. You really go for it.
I
Oh,
saw
that's
two,
great.
black patches in someone's eyes. Is that what you
But
see?
now let it go, because it's not your emotions. Now that's one of the things you remember. That's somebody else's emotion. Now let it go. Let's see how correct it is first. Now whose is the watch?
Mine. I work with screwdrivers at work constantly every day, and I've now got pains going down the bottom of my little finger and also down the bottom of there. I've seen the company doctor about this.
Why was she picking up, do you think, particularly about the eyes? I mean, have you been sort of feeling like almost like you want to bottle up tears sometimes?
Yeah, I always get quite emotional on that, whatever the issue is. It's really good. It's really good reading.
Excellent. Well done. Well done. That's a good start, isn't it?
Really.
My wife Jane and I do our public work for free. We raise money through the theatres to raise money for our Hamilton Parker Foundation. This is a not-for-profit company that is soon to be registered as a charity. Now, our work is going in to help with the objectives of this charity, but you can help us as well by becoming what we call a patron of this channel. Now, as a patron, you'll get, first of all sorts of really interesting benefits. You'll have a sort of behind the scenes look at what goes on with our work. You'll get videos before other people. You'll get new videos. You'll get all sorts of benefits that are explained in the patron website, and it has various tiers that you can subscribe to. So you can subscribe to just a little bit and get a few benefits, or you can subscribe a lot and get a lot of benefits. And what this means is that we can raise some money through this channel. Now, this money's not going to me and Jane to give us a fancy lifestyle. This money is going into our foundation that has some fantastic objectives. Now, the first thing we want to do with the foundation is first of all get a cyber center together, a cyber temple as it were, a place where we can introduce new people to you through this channel. So by supporting this channel and giving something to the as a patron, you will find that this channel will start to get better and better content with more and more interesting things going on. We'll be able to get the cameras, we'll be able to have the space, we'll be able to have the right setting where we can build the energy to do things such as mediumistic circles and so forth online. But also our work extends further than that, because we are hoping ultimately to build a spiritual center, a psychic ashram as it were, where people like you can come to visit and take part in an interactive way through this channel as well. But also we are doing a lot of what we call spiritual service. We are going out and giving a large part of the income we generate to people in India who are destitute. We've given to schools, we've fed children that are in need, we've helped mentally handicapped people, we've given cows to old people in India. Some of all this you'd have seen in my movie Mystic Journey to India on Amazon. But all of this is part of our mission, part of our remit to help the world. Because we're not only trying to find our divine nature, we're also trying to live what we learn and express it in ways that are really beneficial to the world. So if you follow this channel, but more importantly, if you become a patron of this channel, you can help us to take this whole mission onto a much higher level than any psychic work has ever been done before.